Okay, so we've got a really interesting collection of chapters today, all about leadership and spirituality and how to navigate this crazy world we live in.
It's quite the mix, right?
Yeah, we're diving into the works of Johan Cornelsen, Joke Van Son, Volker Kessler, Jack Berenson, Stefan Joubert, CJP Niemand, and Deepika Dabke.
A lot to unpack there.
For sure. But it seems like all these authors are kind of grappling with the same question. Like, what does it mean to lead well in this world? You know, the world that's always changing and unpredictable and complex.
You mean like the whole VUCA World thing?
Exactly. VUCA. Though honestly, it feels like everyone's talking about VUCA these days.
It's become a bit of a buzzword.
Totally. But it does feel like a pretty accurate way to describe what's going on, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. That sense of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
It's
everywhere. But it's interesting that you mentioned the term VUCA. Do you know where it actually came from?
I don't. Actually, fill me in.
Well, it originated from the U.S. Army War College, believe it or not.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Makes sense, though, if you think about it. I mean, they were dealing with rapidly changing battlefields, unpredictable enemies, all that. And it's not so different from what businesses and organizations are facing today, you know, with unpredictable markets and all these new technologies popping up all the time.
True. I mean, how do you even lead when everything feels so uncertain? When the old ways of doing things don't seem to be working anymore?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And a lot of the authors we're looking at today are saying we need a different approach to leadership. Like those traditional top-down models, they just aren't cutting it anymore.
Yeah, you need to be able to adapt and be more flexible.
Exactly. And you need to be able to empower your teams so they can handle the complexity too. Because one person at the top trying to control everything, it's not going to work.
That makes sense. And actually, some of the chapters talk about how there can be a disconnect between senior leaders and millennials. Like they have very different views on work and leadership.
Oh, yeah, that definitely comes up.
Do you think that's just a generational thing? Or is there something deeper going on there?
I mean, it's partly generational for sure, but I also think it reflects how work itself is changing. Like millennials, they've grown up with technology, they're comfortable collaborating online, things move fast for them.
Right, that they're used to constant change.
Yeah, and they have different expectations about how knowledge is shared and how decisions are made. It doesn't always fit with those older hierarchical structures.
You know, you see this clash play out in some of these chapters.
Definitely.
Okay, so if the old ways of leading aren't really working, what are some of the alternatives these authors are suggesting?
Well, there's a lot of talk about authentic leadership.
Okay, authentic leadership.
It's this idea that leaders need to be genuine, you know, and transparent. They need to lead with their values and be true to themselves.
So it's more about being real than putting on a show.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be important, especially now when things are so chaotic and people are looking for something real to believe in.
Right. And along those lines, there's also a lot of emphasis on servant leadership.
Servant leadership.
Yeah, it's about focusing on serving others, empowering your team, building a real culture of collaboration and all that.
Those terms get thrown around a lot. But I'll admit, sometimes I'm not entirely sure what they mean in practice.
Yeah, it can be hard to pin down, I get that.
So like with authentic leadership, it's about being true to yourself and your values, even when it's tough.
Yes. It's being willing to be vulnerable, admitting when you've messed up, and building that trust by being genuinely connected to the people you work with.
I like that.
And then with servant leadership, it's like you're shifting the focus. It's not about you being the boss and having all the power.
It's about supporting your team and letting them shine.
Exactly. Because you recognize that your role is to help them achieve their full potential. You're not there to just boss them around.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in a world where things are constantly changing. You need all hands on deck.
Totally. You need everyone to be able to contribute their skills and ideas if you want to navigate those choppy waters.
Absolutely. Now, there's another kind of leadership that pops up in a few of these chapters that I found really interesting. Spiritual leadership.
Oh, yeah. That one's a bit more out there for some people, maybe.
Right. Like, does that mean you have to be religious to be a good leader?
No, not at all. It's not about that. It's more about connecting to a deeper sense of purpose. It's about asking yourself, what really matters, and figuring out how to make decisions that align with your values.
So it's more about having a strong inner compass.
Yeah, exactly. Something to guide you even when everything else feels like it's spinning out of control. And actually, Stefan Joubert, in his chapter on selfless leadership, makes a really good point about this. He says that discernment, the ability to figure out what truly matters is super important for leaders today.
Because it's not always obvious, is it? What the right path is, especially when you're dealing with so much complexity.
No, not at all. And it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day chaos and lose sight of the bigger picture.
He makes a really compelling case for discernment as this essential leadership skill. Like it's not just for monks or spiritual gurus anymore, it's for everyone.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, Volker Kessler's analysis of Ignatius of Loyola's spiritual exercises. Now, I know this might seem a little random.
No, go on.
Well, these spiritual exercises were developed way back in the 16th century as this guide for spiritual development.
Okay.
But what Kessler points out is that Ignatius really focused on integrating spiritual intuition, emotions, and rationality into decision-making.
So it wasn't just about cold, hard logic.
No, it was about listening to your gut, paying attention to your feelings, but also weighing the pros and cons rationally.
Interesting.
And Kessler argues that this is incredibly relevant for leaders today. They need to be able to use all of their faculties to navigate these complex situations.
It's almost like Ignatius was advocating for emotional intelligence way back then.
Right. Centuries before it became a buzzword.
That's fascinating.
I know, right? It's a good reminder that we need to tap into all parts of ourselves, our intuition, our emotions, and our intellect if we want to make sense of this crazy world. And speaking of integrating different parts of ourselves.
Okay, yeah. That reminds me of Jack Berenson's chapter on embodied realism. That one sounded pretty deep.
It is a bit philosophical, I'll give you that.
Could you break it down for us a little?
Basically, Berenson argues that spirituality isn't separate from material concerns. He says that our physical experiences and our spiritual selves are actually deeply intertwined.
So instead of thinking of spirituality as something out there, it's about bringing it into our everyday lives.
Exactly. And when you apply this to leadership, it means being present, being grounded, creating a sense of stability for your team, even when everything else feels chaotic.
Being the calm in the storm.
Yeah, like a steady rock.
Yeah.
He even says that leadership can be seen as the embodied performance of providing that safe and supportive environment. Okay, yeah, that resonates with me. Like, the best leaders I've worked with, they have this way of making you feel seen and heard. Like you're not just a cog in a machine. They bring this sense of calm and groundedness, like you were saying.
Exactly. And I think that's something we can all learn from, whether we're in a formal leadership role or not. It's about cultivating that presence.
Showing up as our full selves.
Yeah, exactly. Being authentic in all of our interactions.
Wow, I feel like we've covered so much already and we're just getting started.
Oh, there's a lot more to come.
So what do you think? What's standing out to you so far? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Book Reviews 1 so you don't miss the rest of this deep dive.
Because we're about to explore some super interesting stuff like Ubuntu and missional leadership and responsible leadership.
Yeah, get ready because it's about to get really interesting. You know, as we're talking about all these different leadership approaches, I keep thinking about how connected they all are. Like we were talking about being authentic and serving others and being grounded in your values.
Yeah, for sure.
And that actually ties in really well with Anu Shamaka's chapter. She introduces this concept of Ubuntu.
Oh, yeah, Ubuntu. I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I totally get it. What does it mean? And how does it connect to leadership?
So Ubuntu is a philosophy. It's from Africa, and it really emphasizes interconnectedness.
Interconnectedness. Okay.
Yeah, like this idea that we're all connected and that our well-being is tied to the well-being of others.
So it's not just about individual success. It's about the success of the whole community.
Exactly. It's often translated as humanity towards others, or even I am because we are. And when you apply that to leadership, it means recognizing that your success is dependent on the well-being of the people around you.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. And actually, that reminds me of what CJP Niemann talks about in his chapter on missional leadership.
Yeah, how we need new ways of thinking about leadership.
Right. He really emphasizes the need for new paradigms and capacities, especially in a world that's changing so quickly.
Definitely. And Ubuntu really fits in with that, doesn't it? This idea that we need to move beyond these old individualistic ways of leading.
Yeah. Now, Nimitz also talks about the need for a sanctuary for leaders.
Yeah.
What do you think he means by that?
That's such an interesting idea, isn't it? And it's not about a physical sanctuary, right?
No, more like a mental and spiritual space.
Yeah, a space where you can step back from all the chaos, and just reconnect with yourself, reconnect with your purpose. And he talks about dwelling in the Word. It's about tapping into those sources of wisdom that can sustain you when things get tough.
Okay, so it's kind of like hitting the pause button, stepping back from the daily grind and reconnecting with your why.
Exactly. And that leads us to Deepika Dabke's exploration of responsible leadership. She talks about making decisions holistically, using things like the Ignatian discernment method. We talked about that earlier.
Oh, yeah, right. Taking into account your intuition and your emotions, not just logic. But she also brings in Sharma's Theory U, right? What's that all about? I'm not familiar with that one.
So Theory U, it's this framework for change management. It encourages leaders to look inward first. Like real change starts with inner transformation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's about shifting from a reactive mindset to a more generative one. It's about getting to the root of the problem and co-creating solutions with others.
So before you go out and try to change the world, you need to start with yourself.
Exactly. And that connects back to everything we've been talking about. Authenticity, purpose, discernment. It's not just about making ethical choices, it's about aligning your actions with your deepest values. It's about making a real difference in the world.
I see. So responsible leadership goes way beyond just checking the boxes and making sure you're following the rules.
Exactly. And it's about bringing your whole self to the table with all your strengths and vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Like that idea of creating a safe holding environment. We keep coming back to that.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it? And it's about recognizing the humanity of the people you work with.
It's about creating a space where everyone feels safe to be themselves, to contribute their ideas, to take risks.
And that kind of environment, that's where real innovation and creativity can happen. And that's what we need to face all these challenges we've been talking about.
It's really inspiring, isn't it, to see how all these thinkers, with all their different perspectives and backgrounds, are kind of converging on this idea of leadership as this holistic thing.
Yeah, it's not about your title or your position. It's about who you are as a person and how you show up in the world. It's about cultivating those qualities of authenticity, compassion, wisdom.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
So what about you? What's resonating with you so far? Share your reactions with us in the comments.
And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Book Reviews 1 for more deep dives like this one.
Yes, definitely do that. Okay, so going back to the chapters, I'm curious about this whole idea of resilience. We've talked about how volatile and unpredictable the world is. So how can leaders not only survive, but actually thrive in that kind of environment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something that a lot of these authors address. Like Nemeth talks about the need for that sanctuary, that space for reflection and renewal. That's essential for building resilience.
Yeah, you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Right. You can't pour from an empty cup. But what does that sanctuary look like in a practical sense?
That's a good question. I mean, it probably looks different for everyone, right?
Yeah, totally. For some people, it might be meditation. For others, it might be spending time in nature. Maybe it's just disconnecting from technology and having some quiet time. The key is to find what works for you and to make it a priority.
So it's about self-care, recognizing that you need to recharge your batteries so you can show up as your best self.
Exactly. It's about finding those practices that help you stay grounded and centered when everything else feels like it's falling apart.
You know, I've definitely noticed that in my own life. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm not a very good leader, or even just a good person, to be honest.
We've all been there.
But when I take the time to recharge, to reconnect with myself, I can handle things so much better. I have more patience, more creativity, more energy.
I think that's so important, and it's something that a lot of leaders struggle with. We feel like we have to be on all the time, but we all need to rest.
We're human, after all. We're not robots. Okay, so we've talked about resilience, but what about ethical decision-making? In a world where there's so much pressure to perform, it can be tempting to take shortcuts or compromise your values.
It's true, and that's where responsible leadership comes in. Deepika Dabke really emphasizes that ethical decision-making is non-negotiable. It's about aligning your actions with your values, even when it's hard.
Even when it might cost you something.
Exactly. It takes a lot of courage to do that, to stand up for what's right when everyone else is telling you to look the other way.
It sounds like discernment plays a big role here too.
Yeah.
Being able to see through the noise and figure out what really matters.
Absolutely. Discernment is about recognizing what's important versus what's just urgent. It's about knowing the difference between what serves your ego and what serves the greater good.
And being willing to ask tough questions.
Right.
And to challenge the status quo. And to get input from diverse perspectives.
Exactly. In this kind of world, we can't afford to be stuck in our old ways of thinking. We have to be open to new ideas, new ways of doing things.
Always learning. always growing.
And that leads us to another important theme that comes up in a lot of these chapters: the importance of embracing imperfection.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. None of these authors are saying that there's some magic formula for perfect leadership.
We're all going to mess up sometimes.
Totally. It's a journey, not a destination. And we're all going to make mistakes along the way.
It's reassuring to hear that,
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we get so caught up in this idea of leadership that we forget that we're all human.
We are. We're all works in progress. And that's actually a very hopeful message.
It is.
Because even in the midst of all this chaos and uncertainty, we still have the power to choose how we respond, how we learn, how we grow.
We have the power to shape our own destinies, both individually and collectively.
And that's where leadership comes in. It's about inspiring others to believe in themselves, to step into their own power, and to work together to create something better.
It's about having a vision for a better future and helping others see that vision too.
Exactly. And celebrating the small wins along the way, because those little victories can keep us going when things get tough.
It's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But sometimes you might have to take a detour, or backtrack a little bit, or even forge a completely new path.
And sometimes the most important thing is just to keep moving, even if you're not exactly sure where you're going.
It's about trusting the process and believing in yourself and having the courage to keep exploring.
And you know what? It's also about having fun along the way. Because if you're not enjoying the ride, what's the point?
Totally agree. Life's too short to be miserable. Even in a crazy world, there's still so much to be grateful for, so much to learn.
So much to experience.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
It really is. It's about approaching life with a sense of wonder and curiosity, like a child exploring the world for the first time.
I love that, because when you have that kind of attitude, even the tough times can become opportunities for growth.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the power of discernment. It's about seeing the potential in every situation, even the ones that seem negative at first. It's about asking, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this?
Yeah, turning obstacles into opportunities. Yeah. But also remembering that we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
Right? We have each other.
We do. And we have access to so much wisdom and guidance, whether it's from ancient traditions, modern theories, or even just the people around us.
There's always something new to learn, something to inspire us. And we can use that to help us navigate this crazy world.
And that's a beautiful reminder that even in the midst of all the chaos and uncertainty, there's always hope. There's always possibility.
You know, it's really cool how even with all these different chapters and authors, we keep coming back to this idea of hope. Like, yeah, things are messy, but we're not helpless.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of agency running through all of these, that we can make choices about how we lead, how we respond.
Absolutely. And we keep talking about embodied realism and leadership as creating a safe holding environment.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you talk a bit more about what that looks like. Practically, I mean, like, how do you actually do that?
Well, for me, it starts with remembering that the people you work with, they're more than just their job title, you know?
Right, they're people.
Yeah. They're whole human beings. They have hopes and fears and dreams and vulnerabilities and all of that. And when you, as a leader, can create a space where that's okay, that's when real connection happens. That's where trust comes from.
So it's less about being this perfect, strong leader who has all the answers, and more about being open and vulnerable yourself.
Yeah, because when you're willing to be vulnerable, it gives other people permission to do the same.
And then they feel safe to speak their minds and share their ideas.
Exactly. And they're more willing to take risks, to try new things without worrying about being judged. And that's how you get innovation.
It's like that saying, vulnerability is the birthplace of courage.
Right. Love that one.
It takes courage to be vulnerable, but it also kind of gives other people courage too.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's at the heart of what makes leadership really transformative. It's about helping people become the best versions of themselves, helping them use their talents to make the world a better place.
And it's not about forcing your vision on the world.
Right.
It's about inviting others to join you in creating something new, something more just, more compassionate, more sustainable.
I love that. I think that's a really beautiful way to think about it.
And, you know, for me, one of the big takeaways from this deep dive is that leadership isn't just about what you do. It's about who you are.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating those inner qualities like authenticity, compassion, wisdom, resilience, and not just at work, but in every part of your life.
Yeah, I totally agree. Wow, we've really covered a lot today, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface of what these chapters have to offer.
Oh, for sure. And we'd love to hear what you think. What stood out to you? What are you taking away from all of this? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, tell us what you're thinking. And if you're feeling inspired to learn more, you can find links to all of these books in the description below.
Definitely check them out. And of course, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Book Reviews 1 for more conversations like this one.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep leading with purpose. And hey, why not practice a little Ubuntu today? Spread some kindness, connect with someone you care about, and remember, we're all in this together. Dhanyavad, and see you soon.